of Medicine, Kuala. Um, Her focus subjects are disaster education, gender equality and inclusive social, and also climate change issues. So please welcome Dr. Rena. Okay, and our last speaker is Dr. Haikal Azif Haridi. He is now a coordinator of Department of Marine Science, Faculty Marine Fisheries, Universitas. He is also a director of a research center for marine science and fisheries in Universitas Kuala. His focus studies are earth system science, particularly related to the subduction zone and subduction process view from a seismological approach or observation using seismic wave record, right? So please come to the stage, Dr. Haikal. Before we start our lesson, I will tell some condition for our seminar. So all the speakers will give the lesson continuously one by one within 15 minutes for each. Okay. Uh, Q&A session will be at the end of our last speaker lesson. All the participants on-site and online can give some question for our source person. The on-site participant can raise hand and ask directly, and our participant in Zoom can also use the raise hand feature and open mic for asking, or you also can drop your question at the comment bar. So you can speak both in Bahasa and English, yeah. So let's start our seminar for our first speaker, Asok Prof. Daisuke. So Daisuke-san, time is yours.
Okay, Sebastian, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daisuke Sasaki. I'm an associate professor at the International Research Institute of Disaster Science Emeritus at Tohoku University. It's my great honor to give a presentation at the international seminar here. My presentation title is the Measurement of Indicators of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Reduction 2015 to 2030 at local level at case study of Sendai City. So next slide, please. Okay. At the third UN United Nations World Conference on Disasters Reduction held in March 2015 in Sendai City, 187 UN member states adopted a new framework called the Sendai Framework for Disasters Reduction 2015 to 2030. The Sendai Framework focuses on the adoption of measures which address the three dimensions of disaster reduction, disaster risk, exposure to hazards, vulnerability, and capacity. And hazardous characteristics also, in order to prevent the creation of new risk, reduce existing risk, and increase resilience. The Sendai Framework outlines 7 global targets to guide and against which to assess progress. The first target is target A. Target A states substantially reduce global disaster mortality by 2030. Target B, substantially reduce the number of affected people globally by 2030. Target C, reduce direct disaster economic loss in relation to GDP by 2030. Target D, substantially reduce disaster damage to critical infrastructure, disruption of basic services. Target E, substantially increase the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies by 2020. Target F, substantially enhance international cooperation to developing countries. And lastly, 5G substantially increase the availability and access to multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessments to the people by 2030. Okay, these 7 targets will measure progress made by all countries on disaster risk reduction by the year 2030. And these are supposed to contribute to the global analysis of the country level information submitted by countries themselves and documented in their biennial global assessment reports. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the year 2023 marks the midpoint in implementing the Sendai framework. The city of Sendai and the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, IRIDIS, Tokyo University, have worked on an interim evaluation of this progress of the global targets and announced the results of the analysis in March 2023. This collaborative project is based on agreement on collaboration our institute, and city government agreed to release data and documents on disaster damage that was related to assessment indicators. Data were collected from the relevant government departments, then aggregated using an assessment formula in accordance with the UNDR guide for assessment indicators mentioned in the previous slide. So many government departments have joined this initiative written in this slide. Next slide, please. Okay. It's a very busy slide on the right-hand side. Each indicator was compared and assessed according to average values for the assessment period in 2005 to 2014 and 2015 to 2021. It was found that targets were achieved for almost all assessment indicators. In addition, the assessment revealed target achievement of greater than 90% for the majority of assessment indicators. The assessment period of the framework was taken into account, and the monitoring assessment were conducted working solely with disasters that actually occurred during the parameters of the period. When factors such as the frequency of disasters and the intervals of time between the occurrence of earthquakes are taken into consideration, it should be noted that there are limitations to direct assessment in the first and second halves of the time period. Next slide, please. Okay. Damage from earthquakes and tsunami has been on a downward trend. Yeah, downward trend since the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami, which occurred in 2011. And all assessment indicators to our targets were achieved. Next slide. Okay, so although a storm and flood damage is small in scale compared to that caused by earthquakes and tsunamis, this investigation revealed an increase in damage in recent years. Looking specifically at individual indicators, while there was no significant difference in human damage, which means the deaths, injuries, and so on, between the first half and second halves of the assessment period, priority damage, damage to homes and businesses, damage related to agriculture and fisheries, and damage to social infrastructure, economic losses, disruptions to services, were shown to be on the rise, especially in recent years. So next slide, please. Okay. Among the various initiatives related to the 4 priorities for action of the Center Framework, annual figures were examined for initiatives that are highly relevant to the assessment indicators. All such initiatives are an upward trend and be considered to have the relevant targets. So next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. We focused on the number of evaluation shelters for which localized operation manuals have been completed and the relationships of evaluation shelters as initiative that can be quantitatively assessed in terms of disaster risk reduction strategies, and examined annual figures looking at fluctuations over time. The preparation of localized manuals has accelerated since 2014, reaching an achievement rate at 100% of evacuation centers in 2018. Since then, there has been a slight increase in the number of designated evacuation centers. However, the achievement rate has remained at a high level at this moment. Next slide, please. Okay, so centers' effort to disseminate information by hosting international conferences and inspection tours are examples of the city's work for international cooperation. Of this, we studied figures for the number of international visitors accepted for inspection tours and trainings, an initiative that can be quantitatively assessed. Figures saw a striking increase after the third UN World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction held in 2015, with participants in 2017 reaching a record high of 841 people. Training programs are have taken on wide-ranging themes, including early construction, disaster risk reduction, women's leadership, and collaboration with citizens. Programs are presented, not only by government officials, but by people from various boards, that's serving to spread the concept of citizen-led community disaster risk reduction. Many of the trainees come from countries that, like Japan, are prone to natural disasters. Center's experience with earthquakes and efforts towards disaster risk reduction are considered to be useful references. Since 2020, figures have decreased because of immigration restrictions due to the COVID-19 pandemic, unfortunately. Okay, next slide. Information, early warning, disaster risk information related to disaster conditions and evacuation of safety is important to minimize damage. Center's efforts related to early warning and disaster risk reduction in disseminating disaster risk information. Working with large numbers of citizens through emergency alert emails and TV or radio news. In addition, Center City itself disseminates information through means including the internet. One quantifiable initiative is the follower count for social media, which has taken off in recent years. Looking at the Center City Crisis Management Bureau Twitter account, now X account, we observed fluctuations in annual figures. The content of the tweets includes information on natural disasters such as tsunami and floods, information on COVID-19 infections, and their announcement of disaster preparedness drills and similar events. The number of followers has been increasing each year. Next slide. Okay. So, oops. Okay. So this slide shows my conclusion of this presentation. Among the standard framework's 7 global targets, disaster damage for targets aimed at reduction, which means the targets A to D, showed a downward trend as a whole from the first half 2005 to 2014 to the second half 2015 to 2021 of the assessment period. This assessment has revealed that these targets have been achieved for all assessment indicators. In terms of targets aimed at increase, target E to G, steady progress can be observed when data is organized on a quantitative basis for the initiatives led by the Sendai city. Namely, the development of evacuation center management manuals, figures for numbers of people accepted for overseas inspections and trainings, and changes in figures over time for early warnings and access to disaster risk information. Based on the above, this assessment reveals that the global targets of the Center framework with regard to Center City are in the process of being achieved at the midterm point. Next slide. Okay, this slide shows the state of progress in implementing the global targets at the midterm point of the Center framework. So next slide. Okay, further implications are described here. When observed by type of hazards, an increase in storm and flood damage can be noted in recent years. Particularly noticeable is the increase in property damage to houses and businesses, and etc., and damage related to agriculture, forestry, and fisheries. One characteristic of storm and flood damage to property is the tendency for localized damage. In contrast to the large-scale, citywide damage that occurs with earthquakes and tsunamis. This calls for the concentrated and effective promotion of countermeasures. And the second point is to gain an understanding of the effects of disaster risk reduction measures. It is effective to investigate documents other than those containing data of disaster damage, such as collections of records. In the future, the ongoing collection of statistical data and collection and maintenance of records from times of this disaster is desirable. Okay, thank you very much for your listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Sasaki, for the lesson about the assessment of the Sendai framework for the RR in Sendai City and also the finding. So now we will move to the second speaker. Our second speaker is Dr. Rina Suryani Oktari. Dr. Rina, time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator. So allow me to present at this podium. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Agus, our Vice Rector, still with us until now. And thank you also the speaker, Associate Professor Daisuke, and also Dr. Hekal, and all the participants joining in this room and also via Zoom. So allow me to share our research conducting in the three cities, coastal cities in Indonesia, which is Banda Aceh, Ambon, and Mataram. So this research, which allow me to deep and also continue another research in Ambon, Mataram, and Banda Aceh. So I start research in Mataram and Ambon since 2017, and until now, I'm still researching in these coastal cities. So my presentation title is Cities Resilience Towards Coastal Hazard, because the three cities is representing the west, central, and east part of Indonesia. That's why Banda Aceh, Mataram, and Ambon was selected. And this is also because these three cities have similar characteristic in terms of the coastal hazard, and probably like Banda Aceh and Ambon also experience conflict and also tsunami. So yeah, okay. So as a background, we know that global climate change, population growth, and human-induced vulnerability have caused coastal communities around the world to experience significant rates of changes. And next, yes, high degree of exposure to climate change induced rise in sea level coupled with coastal hazards, including the storm surge, shoreline erosions, coastal flooding, and tsunami. And as already mentioned, as already mentioned by our Vice Rector, that Indonesia is highly vulnerable to the impact of global climate change because of its geographical locations. And global warming and more frequent La Nina and El Nino strengthens the sea level rise and increase the intensity of erosions and abrasions with a high level of damage in Indonesia. Coastal communities in Indonesia are risks, not only in Indonesia, coastal community around the world, they are very high risk toward impacts of climate change and coastal hazards, like other coastal communities around the world. Yeah. So it is essential to enhance community preparedness and increase the capacity to mitigate and to adapt to climate change impact to ensure the protections of the coastal area. That's why it is important to assess whether our community living in the coastal area has significant preparedness or resilience toward the coastal hazard. Next. So this is concept of community resilience applied to coastal area, because we know the theory of resilience already developed in other subjects, but in the context of the coastal area, it reflects the adaptive capacity of a community or a system to manage the disturbance of an adverse event of crisis situations. This resilience also provides the capability of the community to recover from the adversity and to mitigate future impacts. There are at least three characteristics to define the community resilience. First, the magnitude of the adverse event that the community can absorb shock while maintaining functions. And the second characteristic is degree to which the community is capable of self-organizations. And the third characteristic is degree to which the community can build capacity to learn and adapt. So there are at least three keywords: absorb shocks, capable of self-organizations, and build capacity. So building resilience into a human environment system is an effective strategy to cope with change caused by future shock or a novel risk. So next, so before we conduct the assessment, we develop an instrument. It's also already published in Progress in Disaster Science. So we first conduct some review on the existing instrument to evaluate the coastal resilience. There are many instruments already developed. Then we see most of the instrument only looking into a more top-down approach. So the evaluations usually conducted without really see what is at the ground level, at the community level, what is the conditions. So we decided, according to the literature review, there are at least 5 parameters to assess the coastal cities resilience, which is institutional governance, social and economic, coastal resource management, land use management, and infrastructure, and adaptation and mitigation strategies. So we also developed some indicators for each parameter. So if you can see here, some of the indicator was evaluated according to the a more top-down approach, which is using the secondary data. But some of the indicator, we also use a more bottom-up approach, which is we conduct the survey. For example, regarding the community involvement in planning, implementations, and monitoring. And then, for examples, regarding the risk knowledge, early warning and evacuations, emergency response, and resource, resource mobilizations. Next. So this is Banda Aceh. Yeah, Banda Aceh is capital city of Aceh province. It has 9 sub-district and 90 village with a total area, 61.36 kilometer square, and a population more than 250,000 people. And next. So this is also Mataram. So you can see Mataram also is a capital city of the West Nusa Tenggara province. There are 6 sub-districts and 50 kelurahan or urban village with a populations around 450,000 people. Next. So this is Ambon. Ambon is also the capital city of Maluku province. It has populations around 348,000. And this is very interesting to know that Ambon, it has 5 sub-districts, but they also have kelurahan, negeri, and villages. So they have 20 kelurahan, 20 negeri, and 10 village. So negeri is like a traditional village. They also receive the BOS fund, but no BOS. Desa apa dana desa tuh? Yeah, village fund. They also receive the village fund, but the usually like the head of village usually was selected by the community, but for this negeri, it is like more turun-temurun. Next. So this is some of the result of the community survey. According to our survey, we can see here regarding the knowledge of hazard, for example, in terms of impact of sea level rise, cause of the coastal erosions and coastal erosion impact, we can see most of the respondent or community in Mataram, it has a better knowledge rather than those who live in Banda Aceh and Ambon, because Mataram has a significant impact of the coastal hazard. So many educations, many socializations has been conducted in terms to enhance the capacity and the knowledge of the community to respond better for the coastal hazard. Very different with the community in Banda Aceh because it's also because after the tsunami 2004, more disaster education only emphasized on the earthquake or tsunami hazard. So very limited people aware regarding this coastal hazard. Next. So in the next parameter regarding the emergency response, so we can also see here things to anticipate disaster due to the coastal hazard. We can see here most of the respondents, especially in Ambon, has better emergency response plans. Yeah, this is also because they have received support from, especially from the USAID, for the some educations and capacity building to enhance the knowledge and skills of the community for better emergency response plans. Next. And this is a warning system. So regarding the knowledge of traditional early warning, we can see here most of the respondents in Banda Aceh, they are aware regarding the local knowledge on the tsunami, but very rare, people know regarding the local knowledge on the flood, coastal flooding, erosions, and sea level rise. And in terms of the knowledge of early warning system, again, most of the community in Banda Aceh has a better knowledge on the emergency early warning. And on the local agreements for early warning of hazard, same, the Banda Aceh has very high level of knowledge on the local agreement on tsunami, but for other coastal hazard, there is no local agreement for early warning of the hazard. Next. So in terms of the resource mobilizations capacity, we can see here community in Ambon has better preparation, especially in the family level. For example, they have other livelihood or land or house in different locations, and then life property insurance, and also they have savings. Very different with respondents living in Banda Aceh and Mataram. Next. So this is why I say that this instrument has a two perspective. We want to see from the top-down approach, which is using the city's resilience assessment, using the focus group discussions, and interview. So we conduct some interview and focus group discussion, and also using secondary data to fill some parameters and indicator has been defined earlier. And at the bottom up level, as I mentioned, we use the community preparedness survey questionnaire, household questionnaire, with a total number more than 900 respondents, 300 per each city. And also we conduct some focus group discussions in order to analyze the SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat in order to formulate the recommendation and strategic actions to build better community resilience toward coastal hazard. Next. And this is the community preparedness index. We can see here this is only for Banda Aceh. This is for the case study. We can see here, so most people has yellow is low preparedness. Low or moderate preparedness in terms of knowledge of coastal hazard, emergency response plans, early warning, resource mobilizations. Next. So this is the results of the evaluations on the city's resilience according to the parameter and indicator. We can see here, for example, some of the parameter has been achieve a better score. For example, the indicator 1 to 1, which is like percentage of households that have access to electricity. This is Banda Aceh conditions, but probably in Ambon will be very different in Banda Aceh. And also another indicator, for example, percentage of households with access to clean water, and percentage of households that has 2 sanitation facilities or solid water. So we can also see here from the first parameter, some indicator which is still gain very low score. For example, indicator 141, which is the existence of routine budget allocation as well as assistance to support activities that can reduce the risk of damage caused by coastal hazard. Because probably most of the budget allocation only for more like earthquake and tsunami hazard. Next. So this is in terms of the second parameter. This is about the coastal resource management. We can also see here the indicator number 3 to 1, which is the forest cover water catchment area. It also achieved a good score. And in terms of management and infrastructure of land use, the indicator of the percentage of concrete roads, and then condition of residential building has gained a good score. Next. And this is the last parameter, which is the risk reduction strategy. So we can see here the indicator number 531. Yeah, regarding availability of disaster evacuation route, it gains a better score. So you can see here in the left side, the summary of the assessment results for the Banda Aceh City. Next. As I mentioned that after we gain some information from the secondary data, from interview and focus group discussion, we also conduct the second focus group discussions to formulate the recommendation and strategy. So this is the results of the SWOT analysis. Next. So to conclude, of course, the need to integrate assessment to evaluate the level of the city's resilience toward coastal hazard. And it is very important to first assess the level of community preparedness at the household level in dealing with coastal hazard, where after we conduct this survey, we can use this to a more comprehensive evaluation of the city's resilience. And it is important to note that the bottom-up procedure is very essential to ensure that information from the grassroots level is considered, where the top-down approach is carried out to ensure that the correct conceptual information is still applied. And the top-down evaluations of the city's resilience is performed through interviews and focus group discussion with policymakers, practitioners, and academics. So next, this is the summaries of my publication to these presentations, and terima kasih. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Dr. Okta, for the best practice about the city's resilience for coastal hazard in Banda Aceh, Mataram, and also Ambon ya. Buat teman-teman yang udah mulai pengen tanya-tanya nih, ditahan dulu ya. Kita akan ada pemateri terakhir kita, our last speaker, Dr. Haikal. So, Dr. Haikal, time is yours.
Thank you. So, we prefer to stand. My honorable for Pak Wakil Rektor, Prof. Agus, and then all the speakers and the participant. We already heard lecture from the two previous speaker. Prof. Daisuke talked about the Sendai frameworks, and Ibu Okta talks about the number of coastal communities at western side of Indonesia, eastern side of Indonesia. I think it's very interesting. And then what I presented here is about more of the local context. So we're gonna see a lot of what's going on in particularly in Aceh. So as the committee asked me to present about this coastal community preparedness and disaster resilience, I just simply put something like challenges and recent development, and everything just follow the same. So this is the main title of the presentation, and then go next. So with this, we're gonna together we go through with this outline. We have a challenge on coastal community preparedness and disaster resilience. We're gonna see some of the unexplored natural hazard to livelihood. We're gonna see that how our coastal community, especially the local traditional fishermen, and then the coastal community where they have their shops close to the coast and also sort of things. And then also that we need to acknowledge also the tsunami hazard, land use change because of that, and the high poverty concentration and low education, which is in Aceh, is located along the coastal district. And then the recent development, improving science communication through community service, which being brought by the TDMRC, especially from Bu Okta groups, and then the recent initiative like capacity building for local researchers through collaborations. So this is the online that I prepared for today's presentation. Next. So in marine sciences, we work with a lot of the coastal community, especially with the fishermen. So we try to understand that how the especially the climate change affects their livelihood. So this is one of the very last explored on the challenges that they have. So the climate change exposure on small scale traditional tuna fisher, where I show on the figure on the left, this is the boat track or the fisherman boat track. It's a very small fishing vessel. We call it boat tap tap. You guys usually saw it on the bridge where we go to the campus. That very small boat with two fishermen, they go very far away, like 45 nautical miles. Is very far away from the coast. I mean, this is their limits right now. They cannot go further to assess this fisheries resource because of the lack in the technology and some sort of thing. So by seeing this boat track, and then we try to identify where is the fishing ground actually, why they need to go to that particular area at the most northern part or most western part or most eastern part. And then we saw that on the side, oh yeah, the blue dots, the small blue dot on the side, on the right-hand side figure shows that that is the location of the fishing ground. So it's really far away to catch this yellowfin tuna. You know, the big tuna fish where we have a sashimi, yeah, tuna fish, yeah, they catch that tuna fish so far away. And then we discussed with the fishermen, are you, just like 10 years ago, are you find the tuna at that location as well? No, my father is close, very close, you know, 10 years ago in the orange box. And then we asked to the grandfather, and then he said, it's very close, just with the small canoe and then can catch a tuna. Yeah. So there is a couple issues, either it's overfish or is infected by this climate change, and then the fish got further to the north water to get a suitable environment for their lives, you know. So this change is not improved with the livelihood activity that they have. So if we check on the second slide, next. Yeah, so they only have these two boats that I said to you earlier. We have the boat tap tap and then boat ba. Boat ba have quite a bit okay, but not that good. But boat tap tap is nothing there. It's just completely not safety at all. So if we play this video, only a little bit video, just click on it and should be able to play it. Yeah, so that is further on the northern part of waterway I showed to you the boat track before. So that is in the middle of ocean. They have a group of fishermen like that, and then they try to catch the tuna. Tuna usually work in the schooling. So if as soon as they caught one, and then they have another one underneath it, so they keep continuously taking. But even though it's very difficult to get, and then when you saw the second video, it's just like, yeah, the facility on the boat is not proper for the tuna handling, and then, you know, this tuna is very expensive actually when they caught right on the spot, but because of very, you know, no equipment at all, and then very difficult to work with the size of the boat and low capacity of the skill of the fishermen, made the tuna price decrease. So their fishing activity become inefficient, their livelihood become very difficult. And with the climate change, with the intensity of the storm, with the increasing frequency of the extreme weather, yeah, they reduce the fishing times, as well as they need to go further out. Yeah, this is already at their limit. They cannot go further than this. Okay, continue. I think we can just next. Yeah, X. Yeah. And then another problem, as I said earlier, is about the tsunami hazard or the extreme wave along the coastal area. Even though Bu Auta already mentioned that we have this land use policy, and yeah, but along the coastal areas we see a lot of change, such as like in here is very close to our. It's not that close from our campus, but we usually go visit to this location in weekend with the family. And then we saw earlier, right after tsunami, a couple years after tsunami, a lot of NGOs, also initiative with the coastal community, they planned this Kasuarina You know, the Cemara Pantai, Casuarina, they plant this along the coast as the coastal vegetation. But again, as soon as recovery is already like 15 years or 10 years, now they start to have this cafe and livelihood activity on the side. Yeah, so they cut down the tree and then make the cafe and modify the location, you know. And then my student, I have this kind of idea. Okay, we can just model what happened if the situation is just like this one. So we have a very small tree on the front, and then we have the cafe at behind, and then we have a lot of car parking there. And then if we have a storm surge like high wave, then we can play the video. Yeah, so the tree actually helped to reduce this high wave, you know, before it hit the cafe and the car and everything after that. But again, because of a lot of social problem on the coastal areas, as I mentioned earlier, like poverty and they need to find something for their livelihood, right? So they just cut down the tree and then make this cafe and all these economic activities. Okay, next. Okay, and then another similar case we saw. This is a very beautiful spot. Actually, this is at the northern on the right hand side. On the left hand side is the map view of the provincial road on the west coast of Aceh. So on the top is the Grute mountain. Usually people stop there and then have some noodles and see a very beautiful view down to the coast area. Now this coast area here on the map is already changed to aquaculture pond. Yeah, a lot of tree being cut down also, and then made this aquaculture pond. We also try to model what's going on if we keep some number of the tree, the arrangement of the tree. We separate, we make it a line, we make it 2 blocks, we make it diverse between one tree and the other, and then we try to model the waves as well. So you can play the video for this one. Just quickly play it, and then just continue with the other one, and you just click next, and then next, and then next. Yeah. So each assignment of the tree when they're planted, they have different characteristic of the wave passing them through the coast. So in this sense, like if we want to cut the tree at the coastal area, we need to have some arrangement so that it can still have the proven factor to reduce the wave, or we can provide other things like increasing the capacity of the society to help them have a good livelihood with the existing environment, just like this one. So not cutting trees, but they have some other strategy to improve their livelihood. Okay, next. Yeah, we see that why is that happen? Because when someone go to the coastal area and then they say, oh, this is a good place for the aquaculture, and then he saw that most of the people at that coast doesn't have any work, doesn't have any livelihood. So they just say, oh, I have a lot of money, I want to make a aquaculture pond. We can make it here. We just cut down this tree and then we make, and you can work, I pay for you, you know? So this is what happened because of the high poverty concentration and low education located at the coastal area. You see, like this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 8 of them are from coast, 8 of them from the coast. So very high poverty level, and then low education participation. So only like 60%. Like if you have 100 people, 40 people doesn't go to the school. 60 people go to the school, but 40 doesn't go to the school. So it's very difficult to get something to improve at the coastal area. Okay, next. Now we have the TDMRC for our Center of Excellence on Tsunami Hazard. We need to work, always working on these issues, and then try to hand on hand with the student, with the collaboration with the international researcher, and then also with the school, try to always have this drill and participatory mapping and all of these things in order to improve resilience on the coastal area. So it's not as easy as flipping the hand, but it's all need always to continuously working on this type of problem, especially from the elementary school. We need to reach them and then try to engage more activity. Okay, next. And the other initiative is the collaboration with the research institute. Like a couple months ago, I just returning back from the OceanX. This possible because of the Kemenko Marfest and join together to invite the OceanX to do marine survey and marine research in Indonesia water. Next. Yeah, it's creating this capacity building for the local researcher, get in touch with the very high-end technological. Next. Such as the ship itself, and then they have the science people on the side, they have media and partnership and education. That's the OceanX working with that. Next. And they have this amazing facilities on the boat. So they have this submersible ROV and all of this high-tech and high-end equipment. Next. Yeah, they can work on oceanography, geology, biodiversity, and megafauna. So it's very important to understand the hazard or the risk that the coastal community may expose. Next. Yeah, particularly recently we just finished a cruise with the collaboration with OceanX, BRIN, and the Hydros and University of Miami and the GMGI. Yeah, we collect data along the Malacca Strait and the Northern Wave Basin, and then the western coast, close to the tsunami source area in 2004. And then we collect some submersible data. You can just click next to play the video. And then, yeah, and also we collect this very interesting environment. You can just click next. At the northern part of Pulau Weh, near to the Pulau Rondo, we see this bubbling coming up from the surface. It's very interesting. And then next. Yeah, at the Malacca Strait, we have this sandy wave and submarine landslide. I mean, it's very important for the hazard risk along the coastal area at the Malacca Strait. Even now we think that the Malacca Strait is safe. It's far away from the subduction zone where we have the tsunami source. But we know that, it's not in the case for the Malacca Strait. We have a lot of things that going on down there. So we need to always, this opportunity gives us more chance to look at and model and do something for the risk that the eastern coast of Aceh exposed. And then next, beside of that, we also collect some of the, it's very unique, living things down there, and some important geological feature. Next. And some of it are really need to model to the tsunami hazard. We saw some of the submarine landslide, a very huge chunk of blocks of rocks slide, and it's very important to model this in the tsunami. Then next. Yeah, and some of the location that we went down to the Sunda Trench to uncover the ecosystem after the 20 years of Aceh tsunami. We see some of very particular or very distinctive condition down there 20 years ago after the tsunami. Okay, next. Yeah, I think that's all for my presentation. This is my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haikal, for the great lesson from some challenges on coastal community preparedness and also disaster resilience in local aspect, especially in Aceh. Terima kasih Pak sudah berhadir. Uh, please give a big applause for our all speakers. We have about 10 minutes ya for the Q&A session. Maybe kalau ada teman-teman yang mau bertanya boleh tunjuk tangan. Mungkin kita batasi untuk 2 dulu ya. Bak tolong cek di Zoom juga kalau ada yang tanya. Oke, terima kasih Bapak, silakan.
Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Waktu yang paling spektakuler bagi saya dan hari ini saya the first time untuk mengikuti ini dan saya sangat tertarik terutama ketiga presenter appreciate mungkin yang pertama untuk Profesor Okay, Professor, I would like to ask you about coastal disaster. Yeah, refer to a disaster that affect the coastal community. I would like to ask you to mitigate the impact of coastal community disaster. What is the essential effective disaster preparedness around Banda Aceh, especially because we have the nine district area affected by tsunami a few time ago, and Aceh mostly coastal area. What is the effective, I don't know, government or government preparedness or community, actually community to protect for the future if disaster, because in Aceh we don't have how to say like a closely incident, maybe 100 years different like your country. Thank you. Saya sangat tertarik dengan presentasi tadi. Yang pertama sekali mengenai coastal area. Ini di coastal area biasanya kalau di Aceh selalu jadi bulan-bulanan ya Pak. Seperti Pak bilang tadi, cut off tree, eksplorasi mungkin terumbu karang, pakai potasium dan sebagainya. Kita tahu bahwa around the coastal area, there are a lot of the biological, for example, like small fish and coral and so on and so forth. Permasalahannya di Aceh, Pak. Di Aceh, betul Bapak menyatakan tadi ada keterkaitan dengan ekonomi, tetapi aware-nya itu memang nggak ada, Pak. Nah ini yang perlu dikembangkan. Government sendiri, Pak. Saya dulu di government, Pak. Kebetulan saya di bidang lingkungan waktu itu. Nah, yang jadi masalah itu, Pak, problemnya. Jadi saya tertarik dengan terjadinya kerusakan laut itu cukup besar. Dan mungkin kita bukan chemical, tapi memang lebih banyak ke disasternya pun terjadi karena man-made disaster. Terutama di pinggir laut seperti yang Bapak tampilkan tadi. Nah, jadi itu jadi sangat baik. Makanya itu, bagaimana cara untuk menumbuhkan sikap positif masyarakat dan aware dan care terhadap itu. Itu jadi tantangan. Terus satu lagi Dr. Okta, ini sorry ya. Saya sekali datang 3 pertanyaan aja, besok mungkin nggak datang. Oke, Dr. Okta. Tadi Dr. Okta membandingkan tiga coastal area in Indonesia, include Aceh. Yeah, I believe strongly that become same problem for nanti. Akan tetapi Aceh, kita tahu Aceh very low. Dia misalnya DPL-nya sangat rendah. Itu the big threat-nya, itu ancaman paling besar gitu untuk Aceh. Nah, Banda Aceh sendiri memang kepedulian masyarakat saat ini kayaknya ya perlu dipertanyakan juga. Karena yang anak-anak, mohon maaf ya, adik-adik ini yang lahir tahun 2000 sekian, cuman just mendengar cerita, the story before sleeping at night, your father, when the tsunami happen, what, nah, jadi begitu. Nah itu menjadi masalah. Untung kita punya MKU ya. Oke. Baik, yang ingin saya tanyakan sama dokter Okta, itu kan berbeda dokter Okta di Aceh, flooded, kemudian earthquake yang di sana di daerah daratan, pegunungan, kemudian adanya angin dan sebagainya. Jadi bagaimana kira-kira dokter Okta untuk masyarakat biar tahu sesuai dengan what is the problem in around me misalnya. For example, like the middle area in Aceh, Aceh Tengah, Gayo, itu mereka yang paling krusial itu apa? Mungkin ya volcano itu dan sebagainya. Yang coastal area apa? Nah ini jadi memang perlu bekerja keras kayaknya, karena kompleksitinya kita sangat kompleks di Aceh. Tapi tsunami karena terjadi sekali dan menghabiskan banyak orang sehingga ya kita seolah itu aja. Padahal yang rutin, BNPB itu rutin menangani bukan masalah tsunami, tetapi masalah itu banjir bandang dan sebagainya. Nah ini, itu juga kembali seperti Bapak bilang tadi, man-made disaster. Kenapa? Cut off tree, kemudian terjadinya blocking di sungai-sungai, tidak ada yang open, kayu dialirkan dan sebagainya. Penggalian gold mining, nah itu over lagi merkuri dan sebagainya yang bisa mencemari lingkungan. Nah itu saja, panjang kali, sorry ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Terima kasih Bapak. Boleh, maybe you can answer first.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. So I would like to introduce the Center Framework again. The Center Framework has the 4 priority for action. So first priority 1 is understanding disaster risk. So knowledge is very important. And second, priority 2 states the strengthening disaster risk governance to manage disaster risk. So governance is important also. And the third priority 3, is investing in disaster risk reduction for resilience. So investment is also very significant for this purpose. And last priority 4, states enhancing disaster preparedness for effective response and to build back better in recovery and rehabilitation and reconstruction. So build back better concept is also significant for the improving disaster resilience. Thank you so much.
Boleh disikapi Bapak Ibu.
Ya, terima kasih Pak, pertanyaannya sangat mantap Pak pertanyaannya. Jadi memang kita melihat banyak kerusakan itu terjadi karena aktivitas dari justru penduduk yang tinggal di coastal. Nah, ini lagi-lagi Pak, seperti tadi bukan hanya masalah kemiskinan sebenarnya, tapi juga masalah tingkat pendidikan dan awareness mereka terhadap kemungkinan mereka terpapar bencana yang lebih tinggi. Padahal mereka sudah, semenjak mereka memotong pohon itu mereka sudah mengalami ada atapnya yang copot, tapi menurut mereka ini masih ya diperbaiki, masih ada resiliennya lah. Nah, mereka beranggap nih masih mungkin ini. Nah, tapi kalau misalnya sikap seperti ini berlanjut, jadi resiliennya itu bukan resilien ke arah adaptif, tapi resilien ke arah yang ini ya, ke arah yang negatif ya Pak ya, bukan yang ke arah yang positif, yang menjaga baik lingkungan maupun menjaga aset mereka supaya aman, tapi resilien yang kira-kira masih sanggup bertahan. Masih sanggup, misalnya atapnya copot, nah masih sanggup kayaknya gitu. Resilient yang ke arah situ gitu, bukan yang ke arah yang membuat aman dan seterusnya. Nah, jadi memang tugas dari kita bagi terutama yang pihak-pihak yang sudah mendapatkan pengalaman, yang sudah mendapatkan ilmu pengetahuan, ini bisa sharing ke community, setidaknya ke community di tempat dia tinggal, dengan keluarganya yang paling dekat, dengan masyarakat yang tinggal di sekitar, dengan tetangga dan seterusnya. Nah, sikap-sikap seperti ini yang perlu kita bangkitkan lagi. Nah, dulu di Aceh itu kita orangnya itu lebih kritis. Nah, lebih kritis kita masih sanggup misalnya kalau ada yang naik kendaraan, buang sampah sembarangan, kita samperin, kita buka jendelanya suruh ambil. Ah, masih sanggup, tapi sekarang nggak mungkin lagi kayak gitu kayaknya. Sekarang ya, sekarang kayaknya agak malu-malu kita ngomong ya. Jadi ada perubahan pola sosial masyarakat juga sehingga eh, apa ya, preventif aksi-aksi preventif seperti itu semakin berkurang. Nah, jadi kalau kita lihat ada yang lagi tebang pohon ya, ada banyak orang yang masa bodoh nggak mau ambil perhatian. Begitu juga misalnya melihat eh, apa ya, tumpukan sampah di sungai dan seterusnya. Nah, ini sebenarnya menjadi tugas kita bersama, menjadi tanggung jawab kita bersama bahwa kita sudah punya pengetahuan, sudah punya ilmu, dan kita harus menyampaikan ilmu pengetahuan kita itu terkait dengan pengurangan risiko bencana, terutama bagi keluarga kita sendiri dan juga bagi tetangga yang dekat kan, yang dekat tetangga, kemudian warga di sekitar kita. Nah, dengan upaya-upaya seperti itu, tentu nih tadi ada pertanyaan juga terkait mana yang lebih bagus nih dampaknya antara government ini pengurangan risiko bencana dari government atau dari komunitas kayak gitu kan. Nah, sebenarnya memang community base yang lebih menarik, Pak. Nah, tapi dari segi community base kan terbatas ya, kita nggak ada pembiayaan dan seterusnya. Jadi ini nanti menjadi suatu PR lah bagi pemerintah bagaimana cara bisa memanfaatkan fasilitas seperti dana desa seperti sudah disampaikan oleh Kak Okta untuk bisa meningkatkan capacity masyarakat kita terutama di coastal. Nah, selain itu memang sumber-sumber mata pencaharian yang adaptif dengan kondisi lingkungan itu perlu dicari. Nah, perlu di-training dan perlu dicari. Nah, saat ini kan banyak misalnya cara-cara sekarang, livelihood sekarang tuh agak-agak unik ya. Jadi diviralkan gitu kan. Tiba-tiba dia udah jadi gitu kan. Jadi memang sekarang nih everything is possible ya right now ya. Ya, something that never comes to our mind like couple years back, but now it can be possible. It can be possible. So jadi upaya mencari livelihood alternatif itu selalu harus bisa dimunculkan, terutama untuk masyarakat pesisir yang opsinya mungkin terbatas. Ya gitu Pak, betul. Jadi kan opsinya terbatas mungkin Pak ya. Di pesisir dia mau nanam cabai nggak bisa. Nah, dia mau bertani nggak memungkinkan. Nah, mungkin yang tinggal di dekat gunung dia mau cari sumber protein yang susah. Nah, jadi kan ada ininya, ada positif negatif di masing-masing tempat. Tapi dengan menyediakan beberapa alternatif livelihood tadi, nah ini bisa membantu setidaknya ada aksi nyata. Nah, ya kita melarang tapi nggak ada nggak ada kontribusi untuk yang bisa dia rasakan secara nyata untuk membantu dia dalam kehidupan sehari-hari. Nah, mungkin demikian Pak jawaban dari saya Pak. Terima kasih Pak.
Oke, terima kasih banyak Pak pertanyaannya. So my answer actually combinations of Professor Daisuke and also Dr. Hekal answer. So the most important thing is actually at the global level, we already agreed on the framework. If you want to reduce the disaster risk, so there's a guideline, there's a priority actions. In the same framework disaster risk reductions, Professor Daisuke has already mentioned, the first thing is to understand the risk. That's why when we want to do the disaster risk reductions, the first thing is to do the risk assessment. So we will aware what is the risk in our area. But it's not only the government responsibility, but also both community and responsibility. The disaster paradigm now has been shifted. Before the tsunami 2004, the disaster is government responsibility. But now it has been shifted. Disaster is everybody's business. So everyone should involve, everyone should take the responsibility. And then the second one is about the governance. Yes, that the disaster is everybody's business, but of course the role of the governments in disaster risk reductions is very important. That's why now we encourage at the provincial level, now they are in the process of preparing their development action plan, something like that. So we want to push that in the government planning, they should integrate, mainstream the disaster risk reductions. Otherwise, it is very difficult to, again, the next invest in disaster risk reductions. So that's closely related each other. So we should work together to reduce the disaster risk. So maybe that's all. Terima kasih Pak. Terima kasih juga sudah memilih untuk bergabung di sini, padahal di FK ada kegiatan juga ya. Luar biasa. Saya kembalikan kepada moderator.
Oke, terima kasih. Mungkin di Zoom ada pertanyaan, Bang. Abang operator. Oke, untuk di Zoom nggak ada ya. Mohon maaf nih karena kita keterbatasan waktu, kita sudahi acara kita pada hari ini. Terima kasih untuk seluruh speakers dan juga seluruh partisipan yang hadir baik di onsite maupun online. Nantikan kegiatan-kegiatan lainnya yang akan dilakukan. Besok ada kegiatan terkait metode penulisan jurnal Q1 paper. Buat teman-teman yang tertarik boleh bergabung di sini, masih di sini jam 10 pagi besok ya. Ya, oke. Terima kasih atas partisipasi semuanya. Saya Zahrina mohon undur diri. Billahi taufik wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.